Okay, welcome back to Sports Injuries Overcome. This is episode 20 or 21, I believe. So we've had quite a few of these over the last couple of years. This week, I'm joined by York City footballer Greg Olley. First of all, Greg, we've had a bit of a chat off camera. How are things for you and how are things going with your recovery?
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Recovery's gone as well as could be, really. It's obviously been over a year now, and I think we're kind of on track and on schedule to get me back playing in competitive games. It's been a pretty long road. Obviously, not being able to do something that you love, and obviously it is my job at the end of the day as well. Has taken its toll, but it's nice to be at the other end of that and pretty much expecting to be on the pitch in the next week or so.
So I suppose then we might as well jump straight into it. Can you talk, for those of the people that don't know what happened, what did happen on the 17th of August? Because obviously that was over a year ago now, and the wider football community know a lot about it.
Yeah, so we were playing Walking Away. Obviously a long journey. It was red hot. I remember obviously it's summertime still in the middle of August, and it was very, very early on in the game. It was about the 12th minute. I don't think I'd actually touched the ball until that point. It was just one of them freak games where, as a midfielder, it was just getting bypassed. But it was just kind of a bit of a melee on the far side, opposite to where I was, with a tackle. There was a bit of a scuffle went on. The ball's broke over to my side where another big tackle's gone in. Obviously both clean tackles, but the game's just carried on and the ball's just fell to me. I've kind of picked it up and probably ran with the ball for about 40 yards. And then all of a sudden I just was obviously flipped in the air. And then as I'd landed, I've looked at my leg, seen that it was dislocated and kind of poking through my sock a little bit, and I was like, that's probably not right. And then quickly kind of signalled that I wasn't right, along with all the other boys that had seen the leg. I only had the briefest glance of it, so I always say I feel sorry for the lads that did actually see it, and obviously up close I was being held down, so I couldn't look. And I've got a couple of friends at Gateshead who are pretty traumatized by it all, to be honest.
Yeah, and obviously not personally looking yourself, but I remember all the media coverage that it got in terms of how long you had to wait for an ambulance, and the actual extent of your injury just seems to get worse and worse on that day.
Yeah, so I don't really remember it being that slow. I think the physio was on within obviously 30 seconds, signaling to the bench and the paramedics who were there at the game that something serious had gone on. It took a while for those paramedics to get onto the pitch, but they obviously gave me gas and air straight away, which kind of numbed everything at that point. It was only until about 45 minutes between that period until the actual ambulance arrived. And those paramedics were the ones that gave me the more heavier drugs. It was the Penthrox. I don't know if you managed to get that when you did yours, but yeah. That could have been one of the best feelings of my life. So you can tell why people get addicted to these things. And then after that, I kind of settled, and they took me to St George's, which was about half an hour away, bypassing a couple of smaller hospitals. But St George's is renowned for being one of the better trauma hospitals. So I was fortunate that was in driving distance, really. Just lucky 24 hours in A&E wasn't being filmed, because that's the hospital I use.
Yeah, I suppose then you would have been featured on TV twice that evening. So with regards to obviously the treatment that you received, me personally, the actual gas and air and all of that stuff before I called it the magic pen, because before that point nothing was working. I remember the agony I was in and going all over the place, but that pen just seems to do wonders for me.
Yeah, I think the gas and air did help. I don't know if it was only my fibula was the one that broke. But the tibia my ankle dislocated to the point where it forced the tibia through my skin. I don't know if this is like maybe too much detail, but people can easily not listen to this bit.
We'll fast forward it.
Yeah. So I don't know if it was that kind of the pain had kind of just been numbed from that. But the gas in air did seem to work. It was only actually when the physio tried to put the dislocation back in that the pain actually was pretty severe and intense. Apart from that, obviously the pen then just does what it says on the tin. It's like you said, a magic pen that just kind of sends you away with the fairies almost. And after that, I remember kind of coming around in the ambulance a little bit, but during that period, there wasn't much of a sensation.
So obviously you've got off the pitch, you've got over that first initial realization of something's not right. What actually happened then when you got to the hospital?
So I was obviously in the hospital. I'll go back to the picture just for a second. My centre half, Robbie Tinkler, actually rang my mum and dad. Like there was that much time that he had the availability to go and get my phone and bring it out, ask me what the passcode was, and ring my mum and dad just to say like, obviously this has happened. They were just listening on the radio back at home, so they actually weren't watching. They heard something had happened, but they didn't realize my name didn't get mentioned over the radio. So they were kind of waiting and didn't find out until this call. So as soon as they got the call, they were straight on a train down. So yeah, back to me getting to hospital. I was kind of put in my own little room, like ward kind of thing, whilst it all got sorted. But obviously, with it being just a leg break, it's not really that kind of a serious case. It's they know what it is, and it's kind of put on the back burner a little bit. So I just kind of probably waited for about an hour. I think I remember the game finishing by the time I'd been seen. I then went for the X-ray to have a look at the extent of the damage. They came back in, told me what was happening. So the next step was to obviously put the dislocation back in. So it was basically grit your teeth. It was local anaesthetic, bit more gas and air, and they just chucked it back in. Basically, I think it took 5 minutes, and by the time they actually got it back in, I think I could feel a bit of pain coming back through. So it was a good timing that they actually got it back in. So yeah, it was pretty rough. And then again, because it wasn't serious, they didn't kind of need to operate straight away. So they gave me, they put me up onto the ward, and then obviously overnight slept as I could. It was pretty disrupted, obviously with your obs getting checked every hour. It's pretty tough to get any sleep in a hospital, but it was then the following morning that I actually went down for surgery.
And what was that like? How were you feeling in that moment of knowing that you weren't going to have surgery straight away? Some of the issue had been resolved, and it was sort of the worst part was over. What was your feeling going in for that op? Because obviously, as a footballer, as a professional footballer, that's your job. That's your full-time job. So you've not really got anything else to fall back on unless you sort of have a side thing going whilst you're playing. So what was that first initial feeling like, thinking, I'm going in for this op, I'm probably not going to be ready to play for quite some time?
Yeah, I mean, it's the first kind of serious injury I've ever had. I've had various throughout my career, but this one was one where you're thinking you hear someone break their leg and have an open fracture that is fairly potentially career ending. Obviously, it never did materialize to that, but that I think that initial thought did pass through my head fairly quickly, especially having that time from the actual incident to then the following morning. It kind of can creep in, and it does become a bit unsettling because obviously I'm watching. I end up watching the game, like unfold on Twitter and stuff. And you're just like, well, I could have been there. That should have been me doing that. And um, I think it was quite upsetting. I was obviously down there by myself. The physio stayed down until about 6, 7 o'clock that night. So thankfully he came in with me and was allowed to stay on the ward for a while. And then it was kind of just me left to my thoughts until my parents got down at about 10 o'clock. Do apologise about him.
He really wants to get on the camera today, doesn't
Yeah,
he?
he did.
So obviously, then you had the physio with you for a while. What did that bring sort of comfort to you? Obviously, I know he's somebody that you're familiar with, but obviously without him there, would you have been on your own?
Yeah, so we had a couple of other members of staff came into the hospital, brought me some food, etc., and then they had to leave obviously to go back up to Gateshead. So yeah, luckily the physio and me had pretty good relationship, and he kept me company for the majority of that evening. But then again, he had to get home because he's got kids, so he couldn't stay the whole time. Um, and it was also the the visiting hours of the ward um, ended at a certain time as well, so he physically couldn't stay. It was only a case of my parents got let in for maybe 5 minutes at about 9 o'clock just because they travelled the whole day. They explained the situation. The hospital were kind enough to let them up. Um, so there's probably a 2 hour window between that of being by myself, and then the rest of the night was obviously me spent by myself. So um, and obviously thoughts can run away. I didn't really look into anything. I just kind of wanted to just chill and relax and see wince and bear the pain basically, and try and get as comfortable as I could.
So, and forgive me if I'm wrong here, but you sound the way you're speaking and the way you're describing it all, you sound like circumstantial. You were quite calm about everything. Was that the case, or was there a lot of emotion? Were you sort of openly emotional, or were you sort of internalizing it?
I think there was a lot of internalization, but I am very just a calm. I have a very calm character in general. I never really get too stressed. I never get too like heightened emotionally. Um, it only, I don't think I'll come on to it later on, but I've only cried once at this whole scenario. Whether that is internalization or if it's just how I cope with things and how I cope with trauma, I'm not sure. Um, so it's just a case of yeah, just I've always been fairly level-headed and just take each thing as it comes, and this was just another kind of roadblock in the way of my journey, as to speak.
So obviously we spoke about the extent of the injury and the initial treatment that you had and everything like that. Talk to me about the days and weeks after you had all the initial treatment that you needed, operations and that sort of thing. What was the emotions going on the next few days and weeks after that?
So yeah, it's pretty tough. Obviously, surgery happened on the Sunday morning, fairly early, so I was one of the first down, which I was pleased about because the pain meds were slowly kind of not taking effect. And then get back up to the ward on the Sunday. It was then fairly painful. Nothing was really touching the sides as far as like covering and masking the pain. So that Sunday was very uncomfortable. Um, I stayed overnight on the Sunday. They had me on like the crutches. I had a cast on. They had me on the crutches late Monday afternoon, just to see if I could manage to do that, which I did manage fine. So they were like, "Yeah, we can discharge you on the Monday night." So I headed back up in a taxi on the Monday night, and I was back home at that point as well. So It was fairly quick turnaround. I know you said you were in for a few weeks, so I managed to be in and out the door fairly quickly, which helped. And just being back up at home was potentially key, and just having been able to get family around, etc., and friends was the good thing. But then, yeah, the first few days very tough. Obviously, realizing you can't just get off the sofa and go and make a coffee or make a tea or make a drink or just get some snacks. You've probably got to get it all on the sofa next to you, already prepped, or you need someone else to do it for you. So um, it's a very weird and humbling situation when you can't do anything and look after yourself as a 28-year-old at that point. And I think that was probably the hardest time of it all, was that first month of just not being able to do anything, and then just sat on the couch, like kind of rotting away, wasting away, basically, aren't you? I've got like two golden retrievers that I love walking. They normally get walks twice a day. Wasn't able to do that for a good 3 months, 3 or 4 months. So that was a hard hitter, because it's a big release, and obviously just getting some fresh air, to going for a walk with those two is kind of what I love, and I wasn't able to do that. And yeah, just getting out and about was just impossible. So luckily I got the cast off after about 2 weeks, and I was in the boot. So that was another positive, really, of the situation. The boot just allows you just to kind of be a bit more mobile rather than just using the crutches. So the boot did help. And I just remember like showering. You've got to sit down in the shower, put the cover on, just keep it dry. Like you can't wash your foot or leg for what was it, probably 2 months, just in case of infection. There's a lot of stuff that you don't really consider until you have to actually go through it. And it's all, yeah, again, it's just a very humbling situation. So I'd definitely say the first 2 or 3 months were probably the most difficult, and the one where you spend most time in your own head, just kind of thinking, and obviously you're thinking of the future. What is going to happen? What can I do to get back on and be like anywhere near how I used to act and how I used to play. So I didn't really do much research into it. I kind of wanted just to focus on myself, because obviously every individual is different, so you can't go off the facts of someone else's story. You just kind of, you've got to go and figure that out for yourself. So I think I've done okay so far.
The one thing with all of that that I picked on straight away. So obviously you said you were on the crutches fairly quickly after, and they got you up. What was that feeling like? I don't know then if it's different for athletes like yourself, but for me, when I'd had my op and I went through the whole process of I wasn't sure what was going to happen, to then tell me, right, you've had this surgery, you're getting up off this bed now and you're going to walk. For me, that was one of the most worst experiences, petrified moments of the whole thing. Was surely you can't get on, surely I can't walk, surely that's not physically okay after what has happened to me. What was going through your head? Did you expect that you were going to be walking straight away, or was it kind of a surprise?
Yeah, I think it was a surprise. It came fairly quickly to get the cast off, which was, I think, just under 2 weeks. I'd got the cast off because I don't know, I had it in my head that I'd have the cast on for maybe a month or a month or two. So when that came off, it obviously also reveals everything underneath, and it reveals all the damage. So I think there was a bit of like almost, no, I wouldn't say excitement to see the scars, but obviously it's your leg, it's what you're gonna have to deal with. So it's that was one thing I found quite intriguing, was that cast coming off. And I remember I actually, was the only point I felt physically sick was when the cast came off and I could actually see the scars. And because of where the bone came out, it's on kind of my ankle joint, where so it didn't heal great at that point. It was still open and a bit and a bit gunky. So I think that was the only time I've generally felt sick with it all. But then, like you said, as soon as that casts off and the boot goes on, it's almost, well, you expect me to walk right now, and it's like, yeah. And I was like, well, it's only been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and I'm starting to put pressure down through it. But I think that's when you just kind of realize that you can overcome a lot of things that you don't think you can as a human, and um, it's just kind of your brain that stops you doing these things. And if you put your mind to it, I think it's you just kind of, I don't know, you get overawed by what you can do. And it was, but yeah, it is funny when you look back and you're just saying, do I really have to walk again now? Because it just doesn't seem right at all.
And that's the thing with the people from the hospital is and the physios there, although they may not do as much physically as a lot of people in the outpatients and the private side of things. Obviously, they just deal with the initial injury and the recovery from that over the days and weeks prior. But do you do you look back on that with obviously positivity now, knowing where you have now got to, or is it still looking back and going, "Cool, that was quite bad," or that was a tough period?
Um, yeah, I think it's a it's difficult to think back on like every little detail. Obviously, certain bits stick in your head, like the cast coming off, like taking the first steps again. Um, but I just feel like everything at the time was kind of on point, and everything went as smooth as possible. Um, it was only further down the line when I'd started to like properly move and try and jog again that I realized that it probably wasn't right. Um, Again, we can come on to that later. But obviously, I've got originally had plates, one plate down the side, and then two screws through my two uh, lower leg bones. So again, just having that metal in your body is another one where you think like, how does that work? How is that gonna? Am I gonna feel it every time I move? Like if I walk, if I move my leg, will I feel it? Can I feel it as I touch it? It's all just a very strange situation. But um, looking back now and knowing where I am, I think me and everyone around us did exactly what we needed to do.
Now, obviously, as time went on, you began, as you said, to get physically better, but you did have the complications that you had on the way. Talk us through those periods, because obviously you have the initial injury that you have, and you sort of get over that mentally, and you sort of push past it, and then the minute there's a setback, it's almost like the biggest kick in the balls that you've ever had.
Mm. Yeah, it's again, it was just a funny period of life in general. I think Gateshead, Rob Elliott was in charge at Gateshead, and he ended up getting the Crawley job around November time. So what's that? August, September. About 3.5 months into my injury, he moved to Crawley. And then there was a 2 week period of between managers that me, Ben Clark, and who is like a Gateshead legend, and Jacob Butterfield, we all helped as like a interim coach and manager group, and I probably wasn't um, ready to get up and about as much as I should have been. But they said, look, do you want to just get out the house and come do a bit of coaching the team, a bit of come to the games and be on the bench, etc., as like kind of an assistant coach. And I think I jumped at the chance just because it did get me out of the house and it got me up and about. So again, that could have been one thing that helped my brain just take over, as well as like my body kind of just get used to that movement again. And again, just got me out the house, which was the main thing because being stuck in there was tough. So that kind of came at the right time. And then after those 2 weeks had come to pass, the new manager had come in, and at that point it was me getting back into the gym. Nothing obviously leg wise, but just being back, and I could move and I could do like upper body stuff, and again just that feeling of being in a gym and being around all the other lads again, 2 or 3 times a week was something that was needed. And then obviously going into Christmas period, January ticked over, and then I think it was early Feb when the physio was like, right, we've finally got to a point now where we can maybe look to move this on and jog. And I was like, okay. I felt pretty good in myself, and I'd got to a point in the gym where it was strong. It felt where it needed to be. And then I just remember going out for this first jog, and something just really didn't feel right. It was so stiff. It was quite painful. There was a bit of a click there, and we got in afterwards, and I discussed it with the physio, and I said, look, something isn't right, and I don't think it should be that painful. I think it might have played on my mind that could have just been the norm, and that was how it's going to feel for the rest of my life. And if it was like that, I don't think I'd have ever played football again. It was that kind of, and you could tell with my limp, like as I was running. So anyway, at that point, we organised another scan, just to find out what was going on. We found that one of the screws was kind of impinging my ligament, which was almost every time I ran, the screw was like catching it, and it felt that was what was causing the pain, basically. So at that point, it was going to see a specialist to say, look, can we remove these? It's quite an early in the recovery process, but if we can get them removed now, it just means I'll have like the summer period and the rest of the season to actually kind of target this coming season that we're in now. So again, whether it was a bit of a touch that we did find that out at that point, or it was just kind of what the process was. And luckily, I've now got those screws. I got those screws out at the end of March, and I was obviously then wary of coming back in that first jog after that to see if that pain had gone away, and lo and behold, it had. So, look, I feel as close as I have done since previous the injury, and it gets better every day. So I can't really argue with that.
Yeah, and obviously, yeah, you come up against those almost like brick walls that you've got to try and get over, and knowing that potentially that's something that's there to help is what's impeding your recovery further. What was that feeling like then? Because obviously you speak about everything that the recovery steps that you had and how you felt when you began them, when you finished them, but obviously you went through the psychological effects of this really hurts. I've just jogged. I've not done anything wrong. I've done everything I've been told to do. What was that feeling like with this jog again? Once the problem had been sorted and you got the realization that there's no issues with the running at all. I feel okay.
Yeah, it was obviously just another big sense of like a bit of freedom again. I think when I first realized that the pain had gone and it wasn't there anymore, it was just a freeing feeling that I could just get back on with what I was doing, almost get back on with my life, and get back to trying to do what I love and what I've done for the last 14 years of my life, I suppose. I don't know. You froze here, so I don't know if you can still hear me.
Oh, I can hear you.
You're back. Sorry, you can edit that bit out. It froze. So yeah, getting back and running again, you don't realize how much of an effect not running has. And I've never really enjoyed running, but just being able to run like a length of a pitch was a feeling that I'll never probably appreciate again. Hopefully, I never have to. Um, to the point where I'm at the stage now where I'm twisting, turning, I'm doing everything with a football I could used to do, to a point where I'm happy with, and I can probably get back and play to a level where I was previously. Um, so yeah, I just describe it as a very freeing feeling, and I think that's one you'd kind of take for granted in some aspects.
So now, obviously, if you are where you are now, you sort of briefly spoke about that at the start. What I think's been really nice to hear about sort of your story and the injury you had was how upbeat you sound about everything now, knowing in yourself that you are almost at a level that you were before. So yes, you've missed out on a year or so's worth of football, but the fact that you still feel that you're able to compete at the level that you are, and hopefully I'm sure the whole football community will have the fingers crossed that you are like that when you start playing. What's it looking like for you now? What's your goal? What's the ambition now as of obviously not playing for over a year?
Yeah, I think it's just been a lot of change in my life recently. Obviously moving clubs whilst this was going on, and it was also a bit of a risk. Like I didn't know whether I could actually get back to this level. I hadn't trained at the end of that season, so I took a bit of a gamble. And luckily York put their faith in me, and the conversations I had with them, they weren't worried about the injury. I did a medical. I did a pretty rigorous scan where I was under the MRI for about an hour, just analyzing my ankle and my leg, and luckily that's all came out fine, and they were happy to take me on, and like I'm just excited to kind of try and repay that debt. But I think there's just been so much work that I probably haven't realized either. There's been since probably November, December time last year when I got back into the gym, the last 6, 7, 8 months have all been prepped for this next 2 weeks. Um, I haven't just obviously been able to just sit and just coast. I've had to work extremely hard to get back to where I feel like I am. Um, so just fingers crossed that um, I get that chance again, and if the chance arises, I think I'll be ready to grasp it. And I don't think I'll ever take a training session or a match for granted ever again. I think it's just a nice feeling just to be back out there and being in within that kind of team environment again. It's something that you really miss.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things physically that you hated or disliked before that you suddenly love. I remember when I first done, I've never been a runner in my life. I was always slow, terrible, hated it. But getting back to running again was one of the best feelings I'll ever have in my life. So I think that's the interesting thing about these things is you don't necessarily think about injuries, and that's something I want to ask you in a sec. But you don't necessarily think about them until after you've had them, and then your whole perception changes.
Yeah, there's just everything's just a bit of bit at a time with these long injuries. You find you take a lot of things for granted, just like walking, like standing up in the shower, like just from going on from what I've said, to then yeah, like the bigger stuff like running, like sprinting, like just passing the ball, just doing keep ups. There's just a lot of things as a footballer that are very very small, but um, again taken for granted. A lot of things, you do realize that really it should. It's almost like an out of body kind of thing. You don't. It's like everything around you that you don't really you look at whilst you're doing it, and if you're fit, and then when you come back and you see and you can kind of feel what everyone else is doing, and you just realize that you can do it again. I think it's one of those things that you can really enjoy, and especially that running. I don't know why I like running as much now, but it's just one of those things that you miss.
So throughout this entire process, obviously you received a lot of support initially off social media and the whole football community. What was that feeling like, getting that many messages, getting that many sort of eyes on the fact that you were injured and the extent of it? How did you feel when you saw that support?
Yeah, it can be quite overwhelming. You don't realize that you have that many people like taking interest in you. I think that was one of the big things, going back to just lying in that hospital bed on the Saturday night by myself. I think luckily I had that to look at, and all these messages of support. And I think I couldn't tell you how many messages I got on my phone, how many messages I got on Twitter, Instagram, etc. It was just kind of far too many, and I had to whittle down. And it was obviously that went into the next week. I was still getting messages, and obviously people raised money for me. There's a lot of things and a lot of people I have to thank for stuff, and I hope everyone knows that I do really appreciate it. And I never asked for these to be set up. It was just kind of someone wanted to do that again. It makes me feel very good and feel valued. So yeah, it's a strange experience that and just to have that platform that everyone really wants to message you and ask how you are. It's and just all the positive messages of how I am as a footballer, etc. It is nice to watch, and did help in that first instance.
So, sort of bringing this to a close, what's your advice for people that go through similar to what you've gone through? Not necessarily the actual injury, but maybe the longevity, because obviously a year's a long time, not so long in the grand scheme of things, but the year up until you're back to how you are now is long. So, what's your advice for people in and out of professional sports that can suffer the same things that you have experienced?
I think for me, it would be probably look forward to them like small milestones. Whether that be in getting home out of the hospital, whether it be in getting the cast off, putting the boot on, um, then obviously your first steps, your first like walk out of the house, any hospital visits. I think they're quite like it's almost like an exciting thing that you've got to look forward to. I think take those little things and try and concentrate and not look too far ahead. But obviously, if you listen to our stories, listen to anyone that's probably been on here and done a podcast with you, it's kind of it does eventually all work out. It might not be where we were before that, but I certainly there's no lost hope in the sense that you can get back to as close to what you were, and you'll still enjoy doing the things that you love. You've just got to work hard and put that effort in between the injury happening and like where you want to get to, basically.
Well, listen, I just want to say a massive thank you for coming on, Greg. I think this podcast is one that as I said to you off camera, I've been hoping to be able to do in a non-sensitive or a sensitive way since you had your injury. So I really appreciate you coming on. I'm not too sure when this will go out, but for me, and I'm sure everybody else in the football community, we really wish you all the best and really hope that over the next coming weeks we do see you appear on the bench. We do see you make that first appearance back onto the pitch, and I'm sure what you want to achieve, you will achieve. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.